So I'm going to jump right into this video because I have a lot to share. I'm talking about, of course, the Kundalini in this video, but I'm wanting to bring also another element in and talk about this work that I am coming to call temple work. This is the work that is done inside the temple. It's the journey of moving to the temple. And I want to start with looking at just sharing with you how this is coming to me. Looking back at my life, there were many challenges. There were obstacles placed before me in my path that were difficult and required a lot of, I guess you could say, stamina. I think all of us can look back on our lives and feel that way. But you begin to think that there's things wrong with you, or that you have limitation, or that you're just challenged the whole time. And it's coming to my awareness that these were placed before me in my life, in my path, for processes of very specific overcoming and purification, in terms of transmuting these patterns or these templates and moving out of them in a greater capacity. As you move out of them, or as I moved out of them, I was able to receive more of myself. So these were placed before me for purposes of forgiveness, for transmuting, for changing, for healing, for re-emerging out of the dross that we come into, when we incarnate into. Now, these were very specific, and they're very specific for all of us. So instead of looking at them as challenges, we begin to look at them as necessary to the goal. Necessary. I'm calling them in this diagram prerequisites, and I've labeled just a few of them: abandonment, abuse, addiction, traumas, mental and emotional limitation or instability, relationship issues, everything from codependency to narcissism, the whole gamut, you name it, lot of work. These are just a few. I had all of these to move through and to deal with, to look at, to face. But I want to talk about one very specific one in a minute that is near and dear to my heart, and maybe yours too. But I want to just say right before this, as I began to move through these and really become clear, not all the way, but just sufficiently out of that frequency, I was literally thrown into the doorway of my temple, literally. And I then began to do some very sacred work. And at this doorway, I began to receive sacred aspects of myself into myself. I began my own work at the level of the temple work. Now, this is very sacred work. It is very intimate work. It is very beautiful. And for me, there is nothing more important than this work. So I'm sharing this with you because I feel that there is nothing more important than this work. Now, as I began to enter into this temple, you know, the body is the temple. We are the temple, and we are on this journey of purification and refinement, right? So I began to receive sort of a blueprint of steps or a sequence into my own pattern of evolution. So I began writing it down. So I have this written down, and I'm sharing this, just the initial steps, with you, and I may in this channel begin to open up and share the rest of it that I've received with you also. It is a blueprint, and standing at the temple doorway here, you have gate 1, gate 2, gate 3, all the way up to gate 7 and into your merge or your union. And this is like a pathway that I've been given. This is a pattern of moving into sacred frequencies, sacred receiving, sacred vibrations of love, until we merge into the ultimate sacredness of frequency, which is the divine union and the divine merge within oneself. Now, looking back, the prerequisites, all of this stuff here, these were very necessary to go through. These were very necessary to learn and to understand what forgiveness is, and to really be able to move into those patterns of forgiveness and allow for the healing to take place in you. I want to talk about abandonment. This one seems to be prevalent, and it seems to be at the base of most people's psychology. This is the lie that we are separate from source. This is the lie that we are separate from love. This is the illusion that we've been abandoned, that we've been left bereft, that nothing works, that we're worthless, that we don't matter, that you're just a small little tiny piece of nothing, that you're disconnected. And the reason why we feel this is because we feel disconnected, because we have somewhat been disconnected. And as you emerge out of this lie, as you really do confront this in yourself in whatever ways it shows up for you, I know for myself, I was thrown like right into this doorway here, and I began to do work at another, I guess I could use the word level for lack of a better word. This is really big work here, so I'm not saying I wasn't doing any work. I was. But this was a whole nother level. Now, abandonment is one of the biggest blockers to the entryway into the doorway of your temple. It's a heart blockage, okay? So the bigger the heart blockage, the more unstable the individual will become. The bigger the heart blockage, also, the more potential strength and power of oneself that one has the potential of receiving. Does that make sense? So this is a doozy here. This seems like to be one of the major blockers that's going to keep people into moving into this sacred territory, this sacred land. Now, the flip side of this abandonment wound in the hearts of so many people is this fear of intimacy. Now, when you've been thrown around and abused and left bereft, and you really believe that in your psychology and in your heart, you're less likely to open up and become vulnerable. Now, this is where we get that whole stance of I am an independent woman, and I know what I'm talking about, and I know this, and this is my truth, and all of those things that we come to be about as an independent person. We feel like we have to hold that sense of independence, or we're just going to get trampled on. We're going to be a doormat. So one of the things that has begun to emerge in my understanding is that this intimacy must be there. We must allow for a pattern of intimacy to be, and we must shed the fear, any fear around it. And as I'm standing in this doorway here, as I begin to go in, this pattern of intimacy needs to expand. And the patterns of independence and strong personality, all of that needs to be shed. You do not need to come to this part of the temple with an attitude of that isn't one of humility and meekness. Those are the attitudes that actually bring the strength. They actually bring your interdependence. They bring, because you are ultimately connected here, and you are that. So they bring this pattern of individuality and strength into you. But I think one of the things that keeps us out is this pattern of I am independent on my own, and I feel like it's a defensive type of stance that will not be allowed in the temple. We have to be meek, humble, and vulnerable. We need to surrender to this. And these are some of the areas where we have to work out some of this in the psychology and in the emotional body, in the heart, before we get thrown into this opportunity. And as we do merge here, we move in through these other levels, however they manifest for you. This is how it's manifesting for me, and into merge, or the union. So I wanted to just introduce this a little bit of information that I am receiving at this time. I'm calling these gates, gate 1, gate 2, gate 3, and so on. And I'm also calling this temple work, because it is a journey of what goes on in the temple, and how we begin to actually live in the temple. And it's a pattern of refinement, it's a pattern of purification, it's a pattern of healing that is taking place within myself, for sure. I want to just touch on this piece of abandonment, and I drew a heart around it, kept the same diagram up here on this board. This is a heart wound. This is a prevalent wound within the body of the masses. This, I believe, is one of the central wounds that keeps one from moving into the sacred temple work within themselves. This abandonment wound is something I didn't touch on in the last video. The bigger your heart wound, the more emotional instability you will have. So just think about that for a minute. As we move through this heart blockage, we begin to become more stabilized in divine love, in the current of divine love. That is the reality of who we are. So we become stabilized. Anything outside of that is destabilizing. So no wonder we've been destabilized. We've been disconnected from the very thing that's going to stabilize. So it's a matter of perspective, a shift in the way you're looking at it, or in the way I was looking at it, for sure, that this needed to be blown through, if you will, and connected into the source that I have responsibility for, which is that current. Okay? Now, the other aspect of this wound is the fact that the bigger the heart wound, in other words, if you're having a lot of difficulty with abandonment or all of these other things, the bigger the blockage, the more potential power there is with the heart, divine current of love. So it's the flip side. Once you move past this blockage, the potential is vast. And that's a good thing to know, because you might feel like you're struggling down here and that it's very, very challenging and very difficult. But just know that the potential or the power that you hold for temple work or working in these ways, in these currents, can be very, very powerful and very, very strong. And maybe that's exactly why you have these difficulties. Maybe you need to move through them in order to develop the capacity to hold such power. It's a matter of shifting our perspective and understanding that not all of us are the same on this planet. There are some people that are going to be doing some things, and there are other people that are going to be doing other things. And to try and fit in society, certainly, when you're doing this type of work, it's completely, utterly impossible. This is sort of the direction my work is taking. It seems to be about the temple, inside of the temple, the journey into or towards the temple, the work of the temple, and then how to live in the temple. As I said earlier, we are the temple, the body is the temple. This is a pattern of refinement and purification. So I'm going to stop it there for now. And I will have a little bit more to speak about in this topic in the days to come. I hope you all are finding yourself well, and I'll speak to you all in the next video.